The class fell into a sudden hush as Malfoy walked in late, but Professor Slughorn didn't seem to mind. "Ah, there you are, Mr. Malfoy. I was starting to wonder when you'd show up." Malfoy made his way towards the empty seat and sat down next to you. He leaned back and folded his arms, glaring at you the whole time. Slughorn continued with the lesson as Malfoy's eyes remained fixated on you. Slughorn clapped his hands together in excitement. "All right, class. Today you will partner up, take a cauldron, and begin making the Amortentia potion." Almost immediately, students start pairing up and moving towards the cauldrons. Malfoy was surprised by your sudden kindness and your willingness to take charge and be his partner, especially considering how he usually acted around you. He couldn't deny that he was relieved by your offer, though he tried to hide it with a scoff. "I don't need your help. You know, I'm good at potions." Malfoy rolled his eyes and grumbled under his breath, but he knew that he needed someone to work with, and you were the best option. "Fine, I'll work with you. But don't think I'm going to be easy on you just because you're being nice to me right now." Malfoy followed behind you to the cauldron, still trying to act as though he didn't need your help, even though he was secretly grateful for it. He stood by your side and looked down at the book you were bringing. "Great, now what do we have to do?" Malfoy looked down at the book and scanned through the list of ingredients, nodding his head in agreement. "Alright, so standard potioning water first, then the ashwinder eggs, followed by the rose thorns, peppermint, and finally some powdered moonstone." He looked over at the supplies in front of them, and then back at you. "Do you want me to start fetching the ingredients then?" Malfoy nodded in agreement and stepped away from the cauldron to start gathering the ingredients for the potion. He went over to the supply cupboard and began searching for the ingredients, grabbing them one by one and returning to the cauldron with them. Malfoy placed the last of the ingredients on the table and nodded. "Yeah, that's everything. That's all the ingredients we need to make the potion." He glanced down at the supplies and gave them a final check, just like you did, to make sure nothing was missing or incorrect. Malfoy nodded and watched as you poured the water into the cauldron. "Okay, the water is in now. We just have to add the ashwinder eggs and then the rose thorns after that." Malfoy looked at you for a moment, a small smirk appearing on his face, amused at the fact that you were letting him take charge. "Alright, let me take care of the ashwinder eggs then." He picked up the 3 frozen ashwinder eggs and carefully dropped them into the cauldron. Malfoy nodded and picked up the jar of rose thorns. "Yeah, I know. I'm not completely stupid, you know." He gently shook the jar of rose thorns and poured them into the cauldron, watching with a look of concentration as they dropped into the bubbling potion. Once the rose thorns were added, Malfoy looked down at the last ingredient, the powdered moonstone. "Okay, last but not least, we have the powdered moonstone left." Malfoy picked up a small spoon and scooped a spoonful of the powdered moonstone, carefully sprinkling it into the cauldron. "There, that's the last ingredient in. Now all we need is the drop of blood or the hair." Malfoy watched as you walked over to Professor Slughorn, who was standing nearby with a small vial in his hand. He took a few steps closer to the cauldron, peering down into the potion as it started to thicken and change colour. Malfoy watched as you returned with the vial of blood and leaned forward to see the drop of blood fall into the cauldron. The potion immediately started bubbling and changing colour, transforming into a swirling pink hue. The professor walked over to the cauldron, a look of surprise on his face at how quickly and efficiently we had made the potion. "Well done, you two. You're the first ones to complete Amortentia without any problem." The professor clapped his hands together again, and the entire class followed suit, congratulating us on our success. The professor smiled and gestured towards the cauldron. "Since you two made the potion so perfectly, I must insist that you both take a whiff of the Amortentia. Go on, give it a smell." Malfoy looked over at you, noticing your nervous expression. "Don't be such a scaredy cat. It's just a potion. Nothing is going to happen to you," Malfoy said, rolling his eyes at your hesitation. Malfoy's cocky expression faltered slightly when you spoke. He wasn't used to you talking back to him or challenging him like this. However, he quickly recovered and tried to maintain a confident demeanor. Fine, I will. At least I'm not a coward like you. He leaned over the cauldron and inhaled the potion's fragrance, closing his eyes as the different scents assaulted his senses. Malfoy inhaled deeply, the scent of the potion filling his nostrils. Suddenly, his eyes widened as the three distinct scents overpowered his senses. He could smell coffee, a freshly baked pie, and the unmistakable fragrance of lavender. The professor looked over at Malfoy, intrigued by his reaction to the potion's smell. Well, Mr. Malfoy, what do you smell? Can you identify the scents that the potion is emitting? Malfoy hesitated for a moment, as if trying to process the sensory overload. Finally, he spoke. Coffee, a freshly baked pie, and the scent of lavender. Those are the three scents that I smell. The professor nodded, seemingly satisfied with Malfoy's answer. However, the class seemed to buzz with interest, whispering to one another as they heard Malfoy's answer. They were most likely curious about why those three scents stood out to him, and what it could mean about Malfoy's deepest desires and affections. Another student chimed in, adding to the speculation. Maybe she likes drinking coffee in the morning. Another student, a girl from Slytherin, snickered and chimed in. Or maybe she just wears a lot of lavender-scented perfume. The class hushed as you stepped forward, all eyes on you as they eagerly waited to hear what smells the potion had emitted for you. Malfoy was particularly curious, his eyes locked on you as he waited to hear your response. The class remained quiet for a moment, a few students whispering to each other as they took in your response. They were all wondering about the same thing. Whose cologne, apples and cedarwood were you smelling? Malfoy stood there, listening intently to each scent you named, a look of curiosity on his face. The professor clapped his hands together again and announced to the class, "All right, students, you can form a line and one by one, come up to the cauldron and smell the Amortentia." The students began shuffling into a line, and soon the class was abuzz with excited chatter as they waited to smell the love-inducing potion. As the class chattered and started gathering around the cauldron, Malfoy discreetly reached out and grabbed your hand, tugging you away from the commotion. He quickly led you out of the classroom, away from the curious eyes and whispers of the other students. Malfoy ignored your protest and kept walking, still holding onto your hand. He led you out into the empty hallway, far enough away from the classroom that the noise of the class faded into the background. "I know class isn't over yet," he said, rolling his eyes slightly. "I just needed to get away from the other students. All that chatter was giving me a headache." Malfoy leaned against the wall next to you, standing close enough that his shoulder brushed against yours. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment, relishing the quiet emptiness of the hallway. "This is much better," he said, his voice softer than usual. "No more whispers, no more stares, just peace and quiet." Malfoy opened his eyes and glanced over at you, an eyebrow raised. "Lie? What are you talking about?" he asked. Malfoy smirked slightly at your accusation, clearly amused by your attempt to call him out. He leaned a little closer to you, his shoulder pressing against yours again. "Careful, you're treading on dangerous ground there," he said, his voice low and laced with a hint of amusement. "What makes you so sure I was lying?" Malfoy rolled his eyes at your assumption. He was starting to get annoyed at your insistence that he was lying or had information beforehand. "No one told me anything. I really did smell those scents, you know. I'm not some petty liar. I'm an honest man." He crossed his arms across his chest and shot you a look, clearly insulted that you would think he would stoop so low as to lie about something like that. As he stood there, listening to your accusations, it suddenly dawned on him. The scents he had smelled, the coffee, the fresh pie, the lavender. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks, and his expression grew more serious. He looked at you differently now, the wheels turning in his head as the pieces of the puzzle came together in his mind. Malfoy's heart pounded in his chest as he processed his realization. You, the one who had just been hurling accusations at him and demanding honesty, were the person he was inexplicably drawn to. The scent of your freshly baked pie, your sweet lingering perfume, your favourite morning coffee, all of it was connected to you. Malfoy could hardly form a coherent thought as he stared at you, his mind still reeling from his realization. He tried to come up with a casual response, but his eyes betrayed his shock and disbelief. I didn't know. I swear I had no idea, he said, his voice betraying his surprise. But the scents, they were unmistakable. Coffee, freshly baked pie, lavender. The silence stretched on between you, and tension filled the air. Both of you were now fully aware of the connection between the scents you had smelled and each other. Malfoy shuffled uncomfortably, realizing the same thing you did. He broke the silence, his voice shaky with uncertainty. You smelled me too, didn't you? I could tell by your reaction. Malfoy sighed in frustration at your attempt to deny the connection. He stepped closer to you, closing the gap between your bodies. It's not just anyone, and you know it, he said, his eyes locked on yours. That specific scent, it's unique to me. The cologne I wear, the cedarwood notes, the apples I eat for a snack. You know damn well it's me. Malfoy, now growing more frustrated with your denial, pushed you back against the wall, his body pinning you against the cold, hard surface. He was so close to you now, his face mere inches from yours, his breath warm against your skin. Stop pretending, damn it, he said, his voice a low growl. You and I both know what this means. Stop denying it. Malfoy leaned in even closer, his face now so close to yours that you could feel his breath against your skin. He studied your features intently, his eyes filled with a mixture of irritation and something else, something deeper. Why would I smell you? He repeated, a slight smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. Because that's what the damn potion does. It makes you smell whoever you're attracted to. And I guess that's you. Go figure. Malfoy's smirk grew into a sly smile as he watched your face turn red. He knew he had you cornered now, and he was enjoying every moment of it. You're blushing, he said, his tone bordering on smug. Does the idea of me being attracted to you embarrass you that much? Malfoy chuckled softly, not taking your insult seriously. He reached up and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind your ear, his fingers lingering on your skin. Maybe I am, but can you blame me? You're the one who came out smelling like a damn dream, and it turns out I can't resist you, no matter how much I try. Malfoy's grip on you tightened slightly, preventing you from leaving his grasp. His eyes narrowed as you tried to push his hand away. You want me to try harder, do you? He said, a hint of mockery in his tone. Why should I when it's so damn easy to get to you? You're the one blushing like a damn fool right now, not me. Malfoy chuckled again, clearly enjoying your protests and the effect he was having on you. He kept you pressed against the wall, his body trapping you in place. No, I don't think I will let you go, he said, a grin plastered on his face. You're not getting away that easily. You're stuck with me, whether you like it or not. Malfoy leaned in even closer, his face millimeters from yours. He could see every little reaction you were struggling to conceal, the way your breath hitched, the way your cheeks flushed. You're cute when you're all flustered and embarrassed, he murmured, his voice low and soft. It makes me want to push you even further, just to see how much more red you'll turn. Malfoy chuckled at your eye roll, finding your stubbornness both endearing and annoying. He leaned in even closer, his lips almost touching your ear. You can roll your eyes all you want, but I can still see the flush on your cheeks, he murmured, his breath warm against your skin. You can deny it all you want, but the truth is right in front of us. That potion doesn't lie. Malfoy stepped back, reluctantly allowing you to push him away. He raised an eyebrow at your denial. Oh, come on, he said, his signature smirk returning. You're really going to stand there and tell me you don't believe it? We just saw it with our own eyes, didn't we? We smelled each other. You can't explain that away, no matter how much you try. Malfoy watched you storm off, a mix of amusement and irritation on his face. He called after you, his voice laced with a hint of mockery. You're just going to run away? "How noble of you," he shouted. "Fine, go back to class. But don't think you can avoid this forever. That potion doesn't lie, and neither do your own senses." Malfoy's smirk widened as he heard your reply. He couldn't help but find your denial and resistance amusing. "Am I a fool for liking you?" he echoed, his voice filled with confidence. "Maybe I am, but I'm not the one who's denying the obvious. You can call me a fool all you want, but the truth is, I smell you, and you smell me. That should count for something." Malfoy watched you disappear back into class, a contemplative look on his face. He stood there for a moment, silently musing over the events that had just taken place. The scent of you was already burned into his mind, and he found himself intrigued by the realization of his attraction to you